Good morning, everybody. This is Terry with Gateway to Counseling, coming to you live today. Um, we come to you live here on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays from about 8:15 to 8:30. And then we rebroadcast in our group, of course, okay? So what an interesting question we have today. The question is, I think my wife is bipolar. What can I do to get her help? So, of course, we know that anybody can go online. Good morning, Sandy. We know that anyone can go online and do some research about the symptoms of bipolar disorder. Some of those websites might be correct. The MD website would surely be correct. And then there's a lot of different psychological websites, right? What stands out the most to me about bipolar disorder is that you have these extremes, okay? Extreme of depression and then extreme of being extremely manic. I'm going to tell you about two cases that I know that I've dealt with. One as a child, one was a child and one was an adult. Both were actually girls, females. And then we'll talk about what you can do to get help. So the first case was a girl that I was actually treating, and she went 4 days without sleeping. She was so tired and so drained, and she had these huge bags under her eyes. But she was not sleeping, and she was up in the middle of the night getting into a lot of trouble. And she was just real frantic. Her movements were real quick. We knew that there was a problem. We knew she was already ADHD. We knew that her mother had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. We weren't sure that she was actually bipolar until then. And so we had to hospitalize her. A lot of children that we see who are bipolar typically have a lot of aggression. Their manic behaviors will show itself in extremes of like fighting and throwing things and getting very angry. And I don't know if this husband's wife is doing that. We've had cases where the adult will throw knives at people when they're in this state, or they will break TVs and expensive things. There was a case that I heard of on TV that was, I think, very, very classic of bipolar disorder. This particular woman, who actually was pretty famous, didn't know she was bipolar. Her twin brother had apparently committed suicide when they were younger, but she had gone on with her life and had married a wonderful man and then had a child. And when she had her child is when things kind of did something with her hormones and got her out of whack. Okay. And so she started doing things like these extreme behaviors. What you will see in manic behaviors is not only are they frantic and on high, but they also engage in risky behaviors. And they're very impulsive. So this woman went to her husband and said, hey, let's go to Vegas and we're going to have a good time. And then while they were in Vegas, she said, hey, let's go and find us another female so that we can have this threesome. And we're on an adult show here. And he didn't want to do it, believe it or not, but he was like, okay. And then they went back home and she started saying, I want to go to Vegas by myself. And then while she was in Vegas, she would call him and say, hey, I think I want to do that again by myself. And he loved his wife and he allowed her to do it. This got progressively worse, as you can only imagine. And she started doing these things. She started saying, well, if I'm having sex with these strangers, I might as well get paid for it, right? And so she started prostituting. No, not because she needed the money, guys. It was just this risky behavior that she found dangerous. And so she had a child and a husband back home and this wonderful life. And she was, this high profile speaker and everybody knew her, but she was constantly going on these trips for speaking engagements. And after her speaking engagements during the day, then at night, she would engage in prostitution. And she got caught. One of the guys that she connected with knew who she really was and knew her real story and exposed her. And that was probably the best thing for her, because she went and got treated and found out that she was actually bipolar. I thought that I'll never forget that story. It was a story that I actually watched on TV. It was not one of my personal clients. But if your spouse, if someone you know is experiencing bipolar disorder, they're going to have extremes. I know me personally, I was put on medication, 7 different medications, because I was extremely sick, close to dying. This was many years ago. And I had something called nephrotic syndrome, and it put me into being diabetic. I had high cholesterol, and I had to take a steroid because I was under chemo treatment, right? No, the hair is not related to that. It's just curly. Anyway, so when I got put on these steroids, it was an oral steroid, and the doctor said it's going to make you manic. Well, I had no idea what to expect, but I would lay in bed at night and my brain would race. I mean, like, I remember waking up one morning, going to bed that night, having a thought, waking up the next morning, and I had a fully developed company in my mind. We were going to sell these calendars, and we were going to do this and do that, and I was going to market it in this way. And I tell you, I had a full business plan overnight, from conception to business plan. And I was ready to implement it that next morning at 8 o'clock. I hadn't slept. And my husband, I was married at the time, and he looked at me and he said, wait a minute, you did this all just last night? You came up with all these ideas overnight? Yes. And he said, something's wrong. then I remembered that I was being very manic. I didn't realize it. Thank heavens he said that to me. Even though I'm not on medication now, I do have some ADHD stuff. So I do get a little manic at times, but I know how to direct it into positive energy. So if you think your wife is manic, let's first get a professional diagnosis. Okay, let's do that first. And then after we get a professional diagnosis, then let's start to seek out treatment. One treatment might be medication, because guys, what happens is the brain functions differently. Sandy, you're a nurse and you probably know this, but the brain functions differently. And so in someone who's ADHD or bipolar, is shooting differently. I know that my brain will shoot off ideas and thoughts so rapidly at times that I can't keep up. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who's also a therapist. And I said, I think I'm really manic today. She said, you think so? I said, yeah, I think I am. And she said, well, don't worry about it as long as you're directing it in the right places, right? And I love that. She gave me the best advice that day. She's a friend of mine. And I know how to direct it. I know how I can engage in 3 different activities at one time. I have a male friend who is also ADHD, and he will read 3 books at a time. I do the same thing. I can't just focus on reading one type of book. I'm reading a spirituality book. I'm reading a business book, and then I'm reading a self-help book, right? And so those things kind of keep my brain occupied. I can't just sit in front of the TV and watch TV. I got to be doing something else at the same time. And then I crash, right? And that's when I go down to Cabo and lay on the beach for 7 days and do absolutely nothing. So you have to know your brain patterns, but sometimes the medication not sometimes, most of the times, the medication will level the brain out instead of allowing it to do these kind of things. Thank heavens for me, I might be a little ADHD. I'm not bipolar because I don't have the other extremes, of being very impulsive, right? People who are bipolar tend to be extremely impulsive, and they do things without ever thinking about the consequences. And you might be thinking, you're an adult. How can you not think about the consequences of your actions? Adults will engage in very risky, impulsive behaviors when they're ADHD. That might mean stealing. It might mean walking into a store and just starting to steal. And not because they have a need. Once again, it's because their brain is going, why pay for this? I can get it for free. and they do it. So I feel for this person who's asking the question of, I think my wife is bipolar. What can I do? Again, I'm going to say, guys, go and get her help. Go and get her properly diagnosed. If you have children, this is extremely important, because a person who is bipolar can be physically aggressive, okay? And that means that they could be abusive to the children and to you. They might be throwing things at you. They might be hitting the kids. They might be slapping them across the face. They can be doing all those things. They might go into the closets and throw out all their clothes because they don't want them anymore. It can be that extreme. And so go and get them diagnosed. Then go to a psychiatrist and get them the proper medication. Here's the other thing, guys, and I only have a few more minutes. But with bipolar disorder, a lot of them tend to self-medicate as adults. What do I mean by that? Well, they smoke weed because it calms their brains down. They pop pills, okay, because it calms them down. They do all these different drugs to try to level out, instead of going and get properly treated with prescription medication that is going to be so much far better than, street drugs, right? And no, not all drugs are created the same. So go and get prescribed the correct medication, because the medication might not work the first time in leveling things out. And we didn't even talk about the other extreme of being extremely depressed. People who are bipolar have a hard time keeping a job. They have a hard time maintaining friendships. They have a hard time socializing out in the real world. And so, I'm going to go ahead and stop, and then I'm going to have to call that person back. That's an extremely important call this morning. All right, so the most important thing to know is they can be either extreme. They have a hard time working, hard time maintaining good friendships and relationships. And if you're married to them, I applaud you. I applaud you that you love them so much that you're reaching out for help. If you need support as well while you're trying to support your spouse, we here at Gateway to Counseling are here for you. We say, enter our gates into a brighter tomorrow where you are in control. We have affordable online counseling anywhere, anytime. Only $49. We take Blue Cross. Cigna just sent us another approval letter today. Ambetter, Medicaid. We're pretty much on everything now, guys. And we do EAP programs. So if you have any questions, please send them to me, and I will see you guys again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.